Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I am Nicole and I live in India. I am reacting today or watching today a video that is giving the perspective of retired Major General Bakshi. This is from the Chanakya dialogues, and it is India-US trust issues. I can say that there probably definitely are some. Probably definitely. There definitely are some. And I can understand why, being an American in India and seeing the policies and the things that are happening on the US side. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and get started. If you haven't already, please give me your like, please give me your subscribe, and let's go. Let's go.
Henry Kissinger even encouraged, prodded the People's Republic of China to attack India during the 71 war. It appears that the United States was almost thinking of making a Ukraine out of India. Things really began to look up in the time of Donald Trump. Why? The American outreach towards the Dalai Lama, the American decision to play the Tibet card means that the ball is still in the play. The simple fact is that there is a congruence of national security interest between India and the United States vis-a-vis China. When Nijjar was assassinated by rival gang, Canada accused India of orchestrating that assassination. After that, the United States has also tried to get very aggressive with India almost as a bargaining point. The United States in the past had refused to give us F-104s, forced us to buy MiG-21. We now have to rethink this relationship. Please like, share and subscribe to Chanakya Dialogues. In the decades after independence, India emerged as the largest liberal democracy in the world. And quite obviously, we felt we had shared values with the United States, the strongest democracy, shared values in terms of liberty, fraternity, equality, etc. But to our dismay, what we found was that these shared values were not adequate, were not enough to cement ties or to get a congruence in our national security outlooks. We realized with dismay that the United States always chose Pakistan's interest over India's interest in the Cold War period because they felt that non-alignment was somehow immoral. The fact of the matter is that the nadir of Indo-American relations was reached just prior to the 1971 war, when, under the influence and prodding of Henry Kissinger, Richard Milhous Nixon tilted heavily towards Pakistan. That was also the time when Henry Kissinger was trying to make a paradigm-shifting outreach towards the People's Republic of China. Now, as a result of that outreach, the hostility against India led by Indira Gandhi, was at its peak in the United States. We discovered to our horror that instead of supporting a democracy, the United States sent the 7th Fleet, headed by the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier Enterprise, into the Bay of Bengal. And then, as it emerged later, Henry Kissinger even encouraged, prodded the People's Republic of China to attack India during the 71 war. He even was prepared to share with them the gaps in our radar coverage. The United States was to give us radars to cover the Himalayan frontier, and then it refused to give them on the pretext of the 71 war. And then it offered to share with the Chinese the gaps in our air coverage, air defense coverage, so that they could be encouraged to attack. It's another thing that China felt it was being pushed into a conflict with India. and because of its own internal factors, it decided to stay out. That was the nadir of Indo-American relations. Then things begin to improve, and by the time we come to the presidency of President Bill Clinton, we found quite a change in perceptions, attitude. Pakistan had been two-timing the United States consistently, taking aid worth billions of dollars and then supporting the likes of Osama bin Laden, sheltering them in Pakistan's military academy, Abbottabad, just 700 meters from that military institution. It was true timing, and that was seen and resented by the United States to a degree. With their winding up the war in Afghanistan, their interest in Pakistan as an ally diminished, very, very greatly, fell perceptibly. That is the time we found that during the Kargil war, they sided with India and pressurized Pakistan to pull out its troops, etc. Things began to grow even better during the era of Bush Jr., when we had signed the nuclear deal with the United States, and that was seen as a benchmark. Then things really began to look up in the time of Donald Trump. Why? For the simple fact that Donald Trump clearly identified China as the main threat. Even during the Obama administration, a decision had been taken to pivot towards Asia, because China was now perceived as the predominant threat. The only country that could hold a candle to the United States was the Chinese, whose economy was the second biggest, whose military was growing at a geometrical pace, geometrical progression, at the pace of geometrical progression, and therefore they had to deal with a rising China. Now, this led to a congruence of national interests between India and the United States, and this far superseded the congruence of values. I mean, values, as we discovered to our horror, were just talk shop. I mean, they were very good for sloganeering, but nothing much else besides. When our core national interests, security interests, began to, have a degree of congruence with relation to growing and increasingly aggressive China in Asia, the United States realized that if it had to counterbalance China, it needed to have two countries on its side in Asia, that is India and Japan. It was President Shinzo Abe who first, came to the conclusion that India must be incorporated in that quasi-alliance structure against China, and he therefore led to the foundation of the Quad. With this, Indo-American relations began to show, exhibit a far greater degree of congruence than it had been earlier in the era of shared values alone. Now we had shared values, we had shared national security interests vis-a-vis China.
Yeah.
China as the main hegemon in Asia. That has worked to a degree. This policy of leaning towards India to try and get congruence of interests, to try and cobble up a kind of an Asian NATO of sorts against China, was pushed further in the Biden administration. But the Biden administration very soon got staged a very messy withdrawal from Afghanistan, because Biden wanted to focus all resources against Russia. Now, this led to the Russia-Ukraine war, which almost was prodded, Russia was prodded into invading Ukraine, poked in the eye almost to invade Ukraine, and that war took away all American interest and energies towards the European continent. Once again, the tilt to Asia became just a talking point. The entire energies of the United States were focused against now trying to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. Billions of dollars worth of military and economic aid, 200 billions plus, have been given to Ukraine, and it is continuing that hemorrhage. Whereas the unfortunate fact on the ground is that Ukraine is now badly short of manpower, it's badly short of munitions, armaments, etc., with which to be able to hold out against Russia. So this led to, this tilt towards Europe, this pivot away from Asia, once again has caused problems between India and the United States. India, quite obviously, as opposed to China, Russia has always been a trusted, time-tested ally of India. 60 to 70% of our top cutting-edge military equipment and technology comes from Russia. When the United States in the past had refused to give us F-104s, forced us to buy MiG-21s, etc., they have consistently not been willing to give us cutting-edge military technology. It's only recently that the F-35 has been offered to India, and that too as purely as a commercial deal, because the French are jacking up the prices of the Rafale. So once again, we found that the very good progress that had been made in the Trump era, now taking a bit of a knock in the era of President Joe Biden, because Joe Biden felt that he could not. It appears that the United States was almost thinking of making a Ukraine out of India, pushing India to fight China to the last Indian, just like they had pushed Ukraine to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. So the Indian government very wisely decided to give preeminence to its own national security interests, its national economic interests. We continued to buy oil from Russia despite American admonitions not to do so, despite the NATO buying all kinds of oil and gas from Russia by devious routes. They wanted to pressurize India to stop buying oil from the Russians. The Russians have given us S-400s, the Americans had objected to it. But the fact was that India decided to give primacy to its own national security interests. And therefore, we found a bit of a cooling off of Indo-United States relations during the Biden administration. Though on the surface, President Biden made all-out efforts to make an outreach to Prime Minister Modi at the personal level. But when they found that India was not quite, willing to go blindly by whatever the United States, to give preeminence to the national interests of the United States over its own. So then we found that they formed the AUKUS. They brought in the Australians as part of that Asian NATO to counterbalance China, because they found that India was perhaps not willing to be egged into a fight with China. Now we find a kind of a reappraisal taking place. We found the United States increasingly expressing hostile attitudes. There was this aspect of the United States support to Khalistan, a movement designed to dismember India. And Canada, when Nijjar was assassinated by rival gangs, Canada accused India of orchestrating that assassination. But the fact of the matter is that after that, the United States has also tried to get very aggressive with India, almost as a bargaining point. And when the National Security Advisor of Jake Sullivan came to Delhi, he was harping on this theme of taking action against Indian officials who they felt had conspired to try and assassinate the Khalistani terrorist in the United States soil. These are very, very injurious to Indian national interests. And we now have to rethink this relationship. I think India has given a strong comeback, and Prime Minister Modi is now visiting Russia as the first visit in his Modi 3.0 dispensation. That itself speaks volumes about which way the things are headed. The simple fact is that there is a congruence of national security interest between India and the United States vis-a-vis China. When it comes to asking us to break off our relations with Russia, that doesn't seem to suit our national interests at all. We have to safeguard our national interests, and the present Indian government, to its full credit, is doing that. I think there will have to be a modus vivendi in which we both realize that we have our national self-interest, and India will never subordinate its national interest to those of the United States. There has to be a parallelism. We cannot afford to be asked to sacrifice all our national interests, all our security interests at the altar of the security of the United States. We also have our security interests to look after. Yep. When that realism comes into focus, then I think things will, again, there is a lot of scope, because the United States-China antagonistic relationship is not going away in a hurry. Things are only going to go south. And the American outreach towards the Dalai Lama, the American decision to play the Tibet card, means that the ball is still in play. The ball is still in play. Nancy Pelosi and a bipartisan delegation of the United States visited Dharamshala, met His Holiness the Dalai Lama. They met the Prime Minister. The Dalai Lama is now in the United States for his medical surgery, etc. So these are signs of change that are going place. As long as it is China, well, India and the United States have a lot of congruence of interest. As long as the United States want us to break our relations with the Russians, I don't think that will work. That is a tried and tested relationship for India. I don't think India would be willing to pay that cost. And as long as we are able to adjust the sum total of our national security interests, we don't tread on their toes, they don't tread on ours. And I think then it could be a workable relationship, because what is at play is United States need to balance and deal with a highly aggressive, increasingly strong China, which is flexing its muscles in the South China Sea against the Philippines, and it is, contemplating an invasion of Taiwan, if not an invasion, at least a blockade.
Yeah.
Should things go south in the Middle East, and there are strong chances of that happening, if an Israel-Iran clash takes place there, then the United States Navy, which was so far quite free to focus on China, will have to divert its resources, and hence the need for India's salience will once again come to the fore. So what should India do? We should give primacy to our own national security interests. Vis-a-vis China, there is a strong congruence with the United States. As far as Russia is concerned, that is a tried and tested relationship. We should be in no hurry to try and dilute that or weaken that for no rhyme or reason. It will go against our own interests. It will harm our national interests. So as long as this understanding comes, Russia also needs India.
Yeah.
Russia also does not want to become, kind of a vassal state of the Chinese. It doesn't want to become number two to the Chinese.
No.
And therefore it needs India. Russia needs India, India needs Russia. The United States needs India if it has to deal with a highly aggressive China. Please like, share and subscribe to Chanakya Dialogues.
Fabulous. So that was the India-US trust issues with the perspective from retired Major General Bakshi. That was really interesting. I really enjoyed listening to him speak. I have to say I agree with him completely. We chose wrong, initially back in the 70s and 80s, and aligning with Pakistan. I really don't. I don't know the history well enough to understand why we did that, but I don't understand why we would align ourselves with that. And then we do have this common. I said common enemy, but I think he was a lot more diplomatic the way he described it. But we have a common interest in aligning together with for China, the Chinese uh, uh, aggression and things that we have seen in the area. I think India actually has done a much better job actually at aligning against China than the U.S. has. You know, here in the U.S., they have TikTok, they have Shein, they have all of the different Chinese marketplaces, and you know, in India, those are not available. India has cut off China in terms of their, you know, their applications on the phone, which I think is fabulous. You know, I have, you know, lots of different friends and family that are just on, you know, TikTok and things all the time, you know. And when you look at TikTok in China, it's completely different when you have it for children. You know, it's education based, whereas, you know, outside in the West, anywhere else, it is just a tool that is basically, you know, making our children uh, you know, addicted to their phones, and it's just not a platform that should be available the way that it is. And you know, apart from the shopping, which I have to say, as a woman, I do miss. I I am happy that I'm not supporting Chinese marketplaces and Chinese uh, businesses with my Indian rupees that I earn. So I think India, in regards to that, has done a fabulous job of cutting China off. You know, it's interesting that, you know, America aligns against Russia, and they want India to not support Russia, but yet, you know, the U.S. And these NATO countries, they're all still purchasing Russian oil. They're all still using Chinese, you know, apps and marketplaces and supporting China in regards to trade and things. Whereas, you know, India has taken a stance against China, a real one, and has enforced these policies and really made it difficult for China to be in India. And you know, I think that's great. You know, I think the West has this uh, listen to me, but you know, there's what is uh, that saying where, you know, uh, I'll I'll tell you to not do it, but I'm going to do it. But I'm going to continue to do it. There's something there, and the older I get, the more difficulty I have in speaking and like remembering these things. But you know, there's you know, do as I say, and not as I do, and that is America. And many of its foreign policies, you know, telling people and other countries on how to act, but not acting in the same way. Whereas I think India, um, they do what they say and they say what they do, which is so important for our country. So if you enjoyed this reaction, please do give me a like. Please do give me a subscribe. It is the easiest way to support my channel, and I really do appreciate it. I hope you have an amazing day. And as always, I love you, and bye-bye.